Good morning. Technologies like cloud computing, artificial intelligence, chatbots, and the like will transform the way organizations take care of their customers. They also have the potential to drive innovation and real business value when they are implemented correctly and applied to the right problems. My name is Andrew Birmingham. I am the editor-in-chief of Which 50, and today's webinar discusses the transformation of customer service and customer experience through the application of digital technologies like AI, machine learning, and cloud computing, and particularly as they apply to things like the contact center. We have three great guests here to help us interrogate these issues. Joining me in the line today are Dr. Katrina Wallace, the founder of Flamingo AI, Tracy Duffy, the head of service development, 2 Degrees Mobile Limited from New Zealand, and Jim Kriskos, who is the National Solutions Manager of CX at NEC. We will discuss the role of machine learning, virtual assistants, and chatbots. We'll consider why a unified approach to the technology you use to serve your customers is now essential. And we'll also interrogate the beneficial impact of being able to accelerate and streamline innovation. Before we get started, just a reminder that we encourage customers questions from the audience. We'll collect these questions as the webinar goes on and endeavour to ask as many of these as possible once the guests have finished speaking. We don't ask the questions during the session as it just can interrupt the flow of the session. So my first guest today is one of the leading thinkers in Australia and indeed in the world on the issue of the role of AI and that it can play in improving customer experience. Katrina Wallace is one of the world's most cited experts and speakers on artificial intelligence and customer experience. And in particular, she was integral in the creation of a cognitive virtual assistant that helps financial services companies across the world improve online sales conversion rates and deliver better servicing for customers. And in addition to being to that, she's been recognised by the Australian Financial Review as the most influential woman in business and entrepreneurship in 2018. And her business, Flamingo, is only the second business ever to list on the ASX with a woman CEO and woman chair. Katrina, welcome to the broadcast.
Hello, Andrew. Very pleased to be with you today.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to get started by asking you how well equipped you think Australian businesses are generally to deliver world-class customer service and world-class experiences, and then in particular how mature they are today in their application of AI to this task.
So look, I'll base my comments in the context of two markets that I work extensively in. So one is here in Australia and the other is in the US. So we have an office in the east coast of the US, and I've been working over there for the last 5 years. Compared to the US, I actually think Australia is well behind being an internationally recognised provider of customer experience. And I see that slipping further and further behind. So I can be pretty hard today, I think, Andrew, on how we're performing as an Australian business with regard to customer experience. And I do see countries such as the US, Europe, even China and India starting to take greater leaps ahead. And I think that's because of Australia's lack of appetite for really investing in emerging technologies, not only artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is my expertise, but along the line of anything in Internet of Things, cyber, blockchain. We are actually, we have around half the level of investment per capita compared to what our counterparts in the US might have. So I'm going to come out boldly and say I don't think we're well positioned currently or what I see in the imminent future for doing customer experience at an international standard. And with regard to then your question about machine learning and artificial intelligence, let's scope that out at the moment. So artificial intelligence is the fastest growing tech sector in the world. Last year, there was $38 billion invested in AI at a global level. And the profound level of influence that we think AI will have to enterprise and business is compared to the same effect as when electricity was introduced to the industrial era. And we really do see that artificial intelligence or an artificial intelligence first strategy will be the strategy of those companies that start to really outperform and return to good growth in revenue and in customer traction. We also know that, and if we follow some of the analysts such as Gartner, who predict that over the next 2 years, $1.2 trillion of value will move from those companies that don't have AI to those that do have AI, and 30% of all customer interactions will be automated by robots or machines. It's really time for Australia to start paying attention to that and think about what role machine learning and artificial intelligence can play in starting to boost and power our humans and our legacy systems to provide better customer experience.
So, Trina, I can just jump in there. Just taking to bring those two answers together, you talked before about the idea that you don't think we're as advanced as we should be on these issues. And I'm wondering, to what extent do you think that's a kind of a cultural or a historical legacy of the way we do business? Because you've described pretty clearly there the opportunity of AI, but if I go back to your previous answer, it would give me pause to think whether we're actually going to capture that opportunity.
Yeah, so I think about this a lot and advise a lot of Australian boards and executive teams on this. So one of the real challenges I think Australia has had, ironically enough, is we never had a real burning platform. We had a marginal global financial crisis, but we didn't feel the pain of, say, the North American market or the European market, where there was really strong impetus for change and the real way that these countries needed to get out of their crisis was to innovate and to make sure that customers were prioritised and real investment was built into the technology that and the people that were servicing customers. So I think it is partly cultural but also economical that we just haven't had the pressures and the drivers to really invest properly as we should have.
So I guess one of the things I'd like to do now then is actually to go and maybe describe in practical terms what are some of the advantages that companies will get by making these investments, but also if you can address, before you do that, perhaps address some of the misconceptions that people have about these technologies. I sometimes think that people think AI and machine learning is just a black box you put on the desk and it solves the problems. But can you actually describe what you think in the conversations you've had that people have, the misconceptions they have around technologies and what it can do?
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with defining what artificial intelligence and machine learning is. So if we think about AI as a term was originally coined in 1956 at Dartmouth University by a bunch of data scientists who recognised that computer software could mimic human intelligence. So that's the basic definition of AI, a software that can mimic human intelligence. Now that could actually be various things. It could be just decision trees or rules-based software or if and then rules, or template matching. It doesn't actually have to be the predominant type of AI that we now talk about, which is machine learning. So very important for listeners on this podcast and generally for people to know that there's AI and there's AI. And there's AI that's not machine learning based, which is just about automation. So for example, robotics process automation may not use machine learning. It just may be clever automated workflows. And then there's machine learning. So machine learning is a type of AI that is able to learn on its own accord and improve every time it conducts a task without explicitly needing to be re-engineered or coded, or necessarily without having a human involved. So it has the ability to learn on its own. And that's the type of AI that we have. We have what's called unsupervised machine learning, which means it needs only a small data set to start to learn very quickly and to be able to conduct tasks on its own. So that's what machine learning is. And really it is machine learning that will power the future applications, whether it's supervised or unsupervised machine learning. So then if we think about your question on misconceptions, there's a ton of misconceptions. So one is that AI can pretty much solve all business problems, and two, that it can do extraordinary things that right now it can't do. So if we then break down into the types of AI that they are, there's five major types. One is deep learning. So this is the AI that's built on neural networks. So think of it, even ours is like that. Think of it as a 300-dimensional graph that is like a human brain. That's how it's structured. There then is natural language processing. So that's, again, something that we do where the machines can actually understand human language and interact with humans using human language. Then there is computer vision. So this is image recognition, facial recognition. Big data and data science is a type of, also sits in the AI field. And then the final one is robots and sensors. So robotics like used in manufacturing, or sensors used in connected home or connected self. So these are the 5 types. Now, we're at a stage in maturity where what we call narrow AI is actually very, very functional. And that is an AI that can complete a particular task. And an example of that is an AI that can retrieve a customer's account information and provide it to them in an accurate way. So that's a narrow task. In our case at Flamingo, we provide virtual assistants and knowledge retrieval systems for employees for a particular product set or process set. And the AI will understand that narrow domain that it's in, but it won't be able to understand anything else that it hasn't been trained. So that's narrow AI, very capable and very efficient now, and actually very affordable now. The next type of AI is general AI, which is like Siri, Cortana, Alexa, where it has to understand to do a multitude of tasks, and it's probably can do those tasks at a very low level of complexity. And then there's superintelligence. So superintelligence is the big machines like IBM Watson that are being compared to being, as smart or smarter than humans. But we're a long way. We're 20 years away from really the time where super intelligent machines will be commonplace. So the misconceptions come from what can AI do? And really it can do very basic automation of tasks or analysis and assistance in decision making. That's pretty much all it can do in the narrow AI fields now. And people expect it though to do a lot more than that. And we know on average 1 in 10 AI trials will go ahead and be successful and move into operations. And it takes about 4 years on average to get a real return on investment from an AI project.
Fantastic. That gives us a really good high-level view of the subject matter. One of the things I was really keen to have you on today to help us with is we've spent a lot of time over the last 3 or 4 months really drilling into the issue of the application of these technologies to customer service, to contact centers, but even to employee experience. And I was hoping for a few minutes if you could talk about how the application of machine learning or the creation of virtual assistants and chatbots actually improves in a practical sense the experience of customers. Maybe talk us through an example and how that can then lead to better business outcomes. So what's the payoff?
Right, so if we think about AI, machine learning, it's set up to do 2 things. It's set up to amplify existing legacy systems and to augment humans. And so that would be augmenting employees. And we call augmented human jobs either HAVA, human assisted virtual assistant, or HAMA, human assisted machine assisted roles. And where we really think that AI, machine learning will assist, say, in a contact center environment is in 2 ways. One is with the customer, so that the customer can actually conduct a transaction on their own, assisted by a virtual assistant which is customer facing. But these tend to be very simple tasks, not complex tasks. So tasks such as change my address, change my password, let me apply for a bank account or a loan, where that is automated and and the customer is guided through by a virtual assistant. Those things work quite well, but they're not yet fully mature, so then we don't need the humans. We absolutely do need the humans. And the best types of AI is when a human employee can jump into the AI platform when the customer believes that the AI is not responding as they need, or the customer feels that they would now like to interact with a human. So our belief is that you must always have access to a human. So in that sense, what customers tell us is that the virtual assistants are very good because they provide timely, immediate information to them that they need, and they're available 24/7. So it's an efficient and convenient way for customers to interact, but really just for pretty basic tasks. So that's customers. Then on the employee side, we really think that the very best application when businesses are starting out to use AI is to do it first with employees, so that you learn about AI, you learn what works, what doesn't work. And we really see the huge opportunity is to augment employees, say contact center agents, with virtual assistants that help them do their job better. So this could be either providing them knowledge, providing them more sophisticated next best response, helping them analyze customer interactions so they know how to interact with a particular customer. And we really see there's going to be a huge role for the Harvard workers or contact center workers becoming Harvard workers, where they've got a buddy essentially who works alongside them that is a robot. And we think there's a massive opportunity there.
Excellent. One of the things I wanted you to do, I was doing some research before we came onto the show about Flamingo's own work. And if you can take the things you've just talked about there and maybe just describe them in a practical terms, in terms of the finance companies where you have particular practice knowledge, how it's changed the way that they work, how are they using the technology and some of the outcomes they've got?
Yeah, great. So we've focused really now on providing virtual assistants for employees. And what we recognised in working, originally we came to market with a virtual assistant for customers. And what we found in the US and Australia is that businesses were not quite yet mature to really have these robots conducting their customer interactions at any type of complex level. And so when we were sort of looking at this, our clients, large financial services companies, said to us, look, actually more interesting for us is if the virtual assistant technology could be applied to our employees, because our employees really struggle to find the right information to provide good customer experience. And we know in some of the large banks that we work with, 60% of customer complaints into the bank is a result of employees giving the wrong information. And employers on average spend a day a week searching for information to respond to customers. So we saw a massive opportunity to provide virtual assistants that sit alongside the contact center worker or the employee that becomes a knowledge retrieval and a knowledge collaboration assistant. So an example of that is we're working with one of the world's largest banks here in Australia, and they have now, we've trained our robot on 40 of their products, and that is now the subject matter expert for the employees on those products. So the employees no longer have to go and seek out the human in the business who knows the answer. The robot will provide it. And then in addition to that, if the robot doesn't have that knowledge or can't point to that knowledge in other systems, it will set up a collaboration program where it sources the person in the business who has the subject matter expertise and then connects it up with the person who's seeking the knowledge. So think of it as a knowledge service desk. And our clients expect there to be somewhere between a 15 to 30% improvement in employee productivity from working in this way with humans and machines, but also to provide a much better both employee and end customer experience. And particularly on the back of the Royal Commission, where there was such an outcry with regard to the lack of compliant, accurate or up-to-date information that employees provide clients, we think there's a massive opportunity there. And further to that, we work with our clients to say, well, now you should think about organisational charts of having human labour, then the Harvard or the Harmer workers, who are the human plus machine workers, and then the digital employees themselves, so the AI that can actually conduct tasks itself. And that's how I'd love your listeners, Andrew, to start to think about the workforce of the future is not in 5 years' time, it's today. How do we start to equip particularly contact centres with these digital labour force?
Excellent. I've got so many more questions I could ask you, but I do want to move on to the others. I do have one quick question I'll ask, and we may come back at the end. One of the things I would like to sort of understand is for companies that are organizations that are looking at this, how hard is it to get started, or how easy is it to get started with chatbots? It's that sort of question of where do I begin?
Yeah, look, I think it's super easy to get started actually. And there's a couple of ways that they think about it. Either they're going to try and build their own, or they're going to go to one of the big houses, so the Watsons, the Amazons, the Googles, or they're going to work with some of the niche players such as Flamingo who do niche areas such as employee assistance, as we just talked about. So one of the questions then is, how is the enterprise going to think about doing it themselves, big vendor, small vendor, or a combination of the three? And probably a combination of the three is the best way to go. Then the most important thing, and we've learned this sort of the hard way, the enterprise, the organisation needs to find a use case that is a burning business problem that has a commercial outcome associated with it. So it's no use in just trialing a chatbot just in an area where you think you just want to see how it works, because that'll be a waste of time, waste of money. It's likely to fail. What they need to do is understand, have a burning business case, a clearly defined use case that has resisted other human or technology solutions. So that's very important. A use case with a commercial outcome that's resisted other technology solutions. So if you can already bang some sort of a digital application in there, do that if that's going to work. But if it's resisted everything else, then it's the time to trial AI. And I think, Andrew, some of the questions you had about, what makes some companies successful in doing chatbots and virtual assistants versus those who don't, it will be around the fact that the use case has not been appropriate enough. And so there's a little bit of science in that use case process development that we've become very good at, and at some stage happy to share that as well. But also, I say under $50,000, you should be able, as an organisation, to design, set up, and fully trial over 3 to 6 months an AI solution. You should be able to do that for under $50,000.
Fantastic. Katrina, thank you very much. We'll bring you back for some questions a little bit later. Just a reminder to all our guests that we do encourage you to ask questions, and we will put those questions to the panelists at the end of the show. A change of pace now as we move to a new form of transformational technology, and that's the area of sort of cloud computing. My next guest works at the absolute coalface of customer experience and customer service, and has some very direct insights into the impact of transformational digital technologies. Tracy Duffy is the head of service development at 2 Degrees Mobile in New Zealand, and someone with genuine hands-on experience in what it takes to implement a transformative customer service. I actually saw Tracy speak at a conference in Sydney earlier this year, and it's one of the more interesting presentations I've seen, and very informative. I was very impressed by her ability to incorporate emojis, Thunderbirds, and conga line dancing into the presentation. But more importantly, to really give a very in-depth presentation about the impact of what she and her team had done on the business. When we're planning today's webinar, I thought it'd be great to have someone who's a living and breathing case study of these issues to come in and talk to us. So Tracy, welcome to the show.
Hey Andrew, good to be here.
I think what I'll do is I'll get you to start, given it's a New Zealand company, I'll get you to just start by describing 2 Degree Mobile Limited for the benefit of our audience, and also your role there.
Okay, so I work for 2 Degrees. It's a full service telecommunications company in New Zealand. That means we sell, manage and support mobile and internet services to consumer and business customers. We include both corporate and government sectors. 2 Degrees launched about 10 years ago. We started at the New Zealand prepaid market by breaking up a duopoly. We delivered better value for money. We basically cut all our costs in half from day one, which disrupted the market, one might say. That behaviour is really the basis of our overall brand, which is fighting for fair. It's a consideration in everything we do. We're also a values-based organisation, and they're really important to us. We reward our employees meeting role model behaviour rather than performance targets. And I guess it's a great place to work because of that, and it leads to a great work culture. I personally started at 2 Degrees as a consultant, but because of that sort of culture, I went permanent within a year. It's good. And my role within that, working as the head of service development, I run a change team in customer care. So we ensure that both the business unusual and the project changes are communicated, trained and understood to our care teams. And the thing that I've been doing this year as well is I've been lucky enough to be the business owner for our contact centre transformation program.
Fantastic. Now, one of the things that sort of struck me as we've been doing the research, particularly in the contact centre space over the last few months, is that an area that was once almost kind of, it almost sort of stood alone, and in some organisations it was thought of as a necessary cost. It's changed now. It's almost come into the sort of centre of the orbit of the customer experience. And I'm really interested for you to explain in terms of your organisation where the contact centre sits in terms of the overall relationship with the customer and the importance of the work that your team does with those customers.
I guess it's the key, isn't it? In the New Zealand telco industry, we're very reactive. If one telco comes out with an offer, the others will follow suit extremely quickly. It's amazing the turnaround. It's therefore difficult to win our customers over with our price or our products. Instead, we have to differentiate ourselves with our customer service. Due to this, our contact centre is the key to us winning and keeping our business, and it also means that the tools that we have to have for our service, to service our customers, must be good enough to differentiate us. So we're always looking for the top tools to keep us there.
So you gave a presentation earlier this year that I alluded to at a conference in Sydney. We described how you've sort of replatformed the contact centre at 2 Degrees Mobile, and I wanted to explore a couple of the issues around that to set some context for the audience. The first thing I really wanted to do is get you to talk about the business drivers for the change. Like, what were the problems that you were trying to solve, or the service levels that you were trying to improve?
Once again, it's around the customer, isn't it? We wanted to increase both of our customer and our employee experience. Everything was about the CX and the EX. Everywhere we walk in our business, it's always about CX and EX. It's the answer to everything. We also wanted to obviously become more efficient in our contact center management, and like any business, we wanted overall cost reduction. So we started with many problems. However, it all really boiled down to our technology. We live in a situation where we've got two IVRs and ACDs, and they back into two different CRMs, and we've got no single view of our customer. We also have separate email, chat, social media, workforce management, and quality systems. The integration for these wasn't great, and reporting wasn't real time. So we were trying to win our customers over by a great CX. However, because we didn't have these systems that were working for us, it was really difficult to support this. The impact on this was also pretty simple. We needed to improve that experience. Without transforming our technology, we'd never make the impact we wanted to. What we wanted to do, or what we are still wanting to do, is take out that mundane work for our agents and to make their role more fulfilling, while at the same time giving our customers their channel of choice with a good service level.
Well, what you've just sorry, keep going. You're right.
Yeah, no, you go.
I was going to say, what you described is very familiar to me. I used to run a small contact centre at the Fin Review, basically a subscription contact centre. And one of the things that really sort of struck me when I go down and talk to the team was they'd have 2 or 3 screens operating at once, and they'd be jumping in between screens and in between systems, and it was quite an unpleasant experience for them. And I suspect that given we have a lot of contact center people listening in today, what you've described in terms of the different systems and integrations would be pretty familiar to many of them. What would the impact be on the business if you didn't resolve these issues? What would be the effect, do you think?
The impact of doing it is, once again, I guess it's bringing it down to not having a good customer experience and a good employee experience, which leads to high attrition rates and high churn in our customers. My job is continuously making those improvements so that we can make a better experience, full stop. So without doing this project, we're just hiding to nowhere. We're just making life more difficult for everyone around us.
Fantastic. Now, one of the big issues that organizations are looking at as they replatform is the sort of, the move from on-premise to cloud, etc. And the solution I think that you guys chose is a cloud-based solution. And I wanted to understand some of the issues around that. Like, were you already familiar and comfortable with the cloud? Were there any issues that you needed to understand to become comfortable with the cloud versus on-prem? And longer term, do you see benefits from the cloud-based approach? And can you describe some of those benefits?
So we were really new to cloud. This was our single biggest cloud or SaaS platform that we were putting in. We'd trialled it before, but it was very small. And so I guess the biggest issue that we encountered was getting our head around the difference of what having a cloud platform compared to on-premise would be. As a company, we were always really used to having that full control of on-premise, so making that jump was difficult. And I can tell you that our operations team were the ones who struggled with this the most. I know in theory, it sounds easy because it's a managed service that someone else is dealing with the problems there. But in theory, although in theory we shouldn't have had to worry about it, we also did need to understand around the integration layer. Is this our problem? Is it around the integration? Is it the SaaS platform? And so that troubleshooting was where we really have found difficulties. So we're still in the process of this project and we're working through these, but we've put reporting in place and we've identified holes in our own processes that we've needed to fill. Like we've ensured that our operational teams are available for all aspects of our side, which we didn't have before because, you know, we always knew that it was our problem, so we'd find a way, but now we don't. So we've got to look on both sides. However, saying that, you know, it is cloud and it is a managed service and there are just so many benefits to it, and that's why everyone is going that way. I guess it's scalable. You don't need to keep on growing your data center. There's high security. And our operations team has decreased since going to the cloud. So in theory, it is great. It's just different, and you know, people take time to get used to change. So we'll get there. It's a process.
Excellent. Now, one of the things I really loved about your presentation in Sydney earlier this year was you gave I thought was a real warts and all overview of what that process was like, what that journey was like. And I thought it was very honest appraisal of what it was like, and it was ultimately successful. Well, the question I'd always like to ask in this situation is, for people who are listening in and considering this, what advice would you give to anyone in the audience who's considering taking a similar journey? I mean, what did you learn along the way? What did you love? And what would you do differently?
I've learnt so much along the way. There's so much to say here. I guess what I'd start with is, if you're putting a project in like this, you need to make sure you've got a lot of contingency in there. It's always going to take longer and it's going to be harder than you think. And even when you think that you've got the contingency in there, put some more in. It's amazing the little things that crop up. And I guess, you know, I said this is the first major project that we've made in SaaS, so there is so much that we didn't know. And key is change management, making sure your teams know exactly what they're getting and why you're doing it, what's in it for them, and get them hyped about this. When I presented in Sydney, I showed a little bit of what we did, but we made things like cupcakes for every implementation. Our project was broken up into 5 phases, so there'd be cupcakes every time we went live. We did road shows to tell people about it. I made people chant about chat in the app. We gave out lollies and spot prizes of t-shirts. Our project was called Thunderbird, so it was really easy to brand our project with everything we did. It just, what happens when you get people hyped about it, or what we found when we got people hyped about the project, when the little things go wrong, because there's always something that goes wrong, they don't worry about it so much. They've got an overall good experience about what's happening, so it makes life easier. I also suggest that you spend time up front understanding your vendor or SI about how they work compared to how you work, and what they'll require from you throughout the project and when that will be required. Really finding out whether your working styles match, and if they don't, what support you need or they'll need to make sure that they work together well. You also need to make sure that you've got enough people to run this project. I said just before that we ran this in 5 phases, and we did the stupid mistake, and I blame myself entirely, of thinking that we could have one project manager to manage 5 different phases of the project. Now that it takes a lot more management than that. And thankfully we identified this quickly and we resourced up and got enough people, but over a period of time it was quite difficult. We also set up a steer code between our company and our vendor, and we met regularly to discuss those issues, just to make sure that they didn't fester.
Fantastic. Now, again, there's about a dozen other questions I'd love to ask you, but I do want to get to Jim, so we might come back to you with some more questions at the end. But again, for our audience, we've got some great insights from the panel today, so please feel free to ask your questions. So thank you, Tracy. Now, my final guest today is Jim Chryskos, who is the National Solutions Manager Customer Experience at NEC. And I want to talk to Jim today about the issues that Katrina and Tracy have both raised. These issues sit at the heart of the work that Jim and his team do, helping companies to implement cloud-based solutions that improve customer service and experiences. And by way of disclosure, the platform that Tracy and her team implemented in New Zealand is the same one that NEC provides to the Australian market. Jim, welcome back to the webinar series.
Thanks, Andrew.
Now, both Katrina and Tracy have spoken extensively about the role that technologies like AI, machine learning, and cloud-based SaaS can play in improving significantly the service levels that customers receive, but also the opportunity that it provides to innovate and build new value. When you think about your customers in Australia, how important is that consideration around innovation, and in particular, reducing time to value through the ease of innovation and through continuous improvement?
Well, I think it's critical. I think if you take a historical view of the business case for moving to cloud, I think what you'll see is that the initial thoughts were around the economic benefit, the commercial benefit of being able to consume as required, and that still holds true. But what we're seeing in the marketplace today is really a lean towards innovation, and SaaS and cloud are a big enabler of that. So, you know, you've got a situation now where technology, or the high tech, as we like to call it, was only really available to the enterprise type customers. So, you know, if you think about your text to speech or your voice recognition, it was really the banks and the telcos that were doing all that. Nowadays, though, with the emergence of SaaS, that kind of technology is available to everybody. And what that means for our customers is that the competitive landscape is changing. So, interesting statistic that I heard recently was that what seems to happen is once an organization migrates to cloud, it starts by consuming something like 15% of the overall capability within the cloud platform in terms of features, and then over time that migrates up to about 50%. So the uptake of the additional services and features available talks to that innovation story. I think the other piece, so the good thing about SaaS obviously is that the vendors themselves are innovating the platform periodically and adding more functionality and features to it, which our customers like to take advantage of it. But there's a couple of other elements as well. So all these SaaS platforms these days now have a rich set of APIs which exposes this functionality to our customers. So we now see a situation where a lot of organizations are insourcing their development and leveraging the cloud capability, but then taking that development on themselves. And what that does for them is actually speed up their roadmaps, because they're no longer reliant on necessarily on vendors and systems integrators to action roadmaps. They can take that development in-house. And the other thing that's, I think, driving the innovation for customers, a lot of these cloud platforms also have a development partner ecosystem. So, you know, a bunch of, it's basically the app store for cloud, where you can essentially look at a bunch of different applications, and if they're applicable to your business, then you can start consuming that as part of your service. So I think, you know, the other change I think that we're seeing in the marketplace is that what our customers want to do is spend less time on the must do things such as compliance work and security, and those items are inherent within the cloud platforms now. So it's one thing less they need to do. So they're not necessarily worrying about the technology aspect as much. They still are a little bit, but not as much. It's more around the business aspect. So that's freeing up a lot of resource, a lot of time, a lot of budget to allow our customers to react and disrupt as required. I think the flow-on effect of that, and I think Tracy alluded a little bit to it, is that you start moving away from having the deep technical conversations within your business and writing, requesting budgets for major projects and those sorts of things, and you're moving away to more of a business-focused conversation. That's, I think, one of the major culture changes that our customers are experiencing.
Fantastic. I do want to drill into one of the issues that Tracy talked about, and she was very sort of passionate about the role that her team plays with the customers. Now, in the past, customer service has often been considered a necessary cost, but the sense that I'm getting, especially around the innovation around contact centers and customer service, is that contact centers increasingly has been seen as something which needs to be considered as central to the overall engagement with customers. For brands that are looking to increase revenue through improved end-to-end service delivery and improved customer experience, why is it important to equip those frontline staff with, say, sophisticated and contemporary tools? And what's the business impact of doing that?
Again, I'll answer this from, I guess, a historical perspective. If you cast your mind back five or more years ago, the role of the chief customer experience officer didn't exist, right? And what that says essentially is companies are now identifying that, or have identified that the customer experience is probably one of the most important drivers. And Forrester will tell you, when they back it up with their research, with their CX index research, which is predominantly US based, but it is good research. And what it basically says is, with every increase of a point in the index equates to an increase in revenue. So they cite a case over in the US. They call it a big box retailer, so we can all sort of work out who that is. But essentially, one point in increase in CX equates to about $250 million increase in revenue. So everybody understands that, and everybody understands that the customer loyalty and customer retention is going to be driven by customer service. And I think in some of the research also, it shows that at least 80+% of the companies that out there today expect to compete on their customer service. So on that basis, everybody, I think, nowadays understands that the CX is probably one of the most critical parts of the business. The other thing I heard Tracy say, which I think I'll reiterate, and that came from essentially, basically, we sat back and did our strategy sessions earlier this year to define our roadmap for the next year or two. And one of the things that's also emerging is not only just the customer experience is important, but also the employee experience. It's suddenly dawned on everybody that if you look after your employees, then maybe they'll look after your customers as well. And that's obviously a very strong initiative throughout. I guess all our vendors now are showing that they've got initiatives around EX and CX. So yeah, I think to answer your question, Andrew, it is of paramount importance now. It's not the back office type contact center scenario. It is really the front door to the customers.
Fantastic. So you and I have spoken in the past about the desire that companies have to deliver genuine omnichannel experiences. My sense as somebody who's written about technology for a long time now is that often that feels more like an aspiration, like the pursuit of happiness, than an actual deliverable outcome, particularly in environments where there's a lot of disintegration between systems. Can you talk a little bit about how a technology like cloud computing makes the delivery of genuine omnichannel experiences more likely? Like, what are the problems that it overcomes?
So if you look at the evolution of an on-premise, for example, contact center, it would have normally started with, a routing environment, an ACD, which on top of that, you would have bolted some IVR, you would have bolted some call recording, some quality management, some knowledge management, all those sorts of things. Now, not necessarily all coming from the one vendor. They might be what we call the spider web of integrations from various vendors. And unfortunately, various vendors have, competing priorities, so they'll try and sell you different bits and pieces. And then on top of that, you've got the organization itself, which, could be working in a siloed fashion with siloed business units and processes. So it leaves you in a situation where you've got enterprise data across multiple systems. You got it in data warehouses, you got it in different data lakes, you got it in spreadsheets, in Access databases I've seen, in file systems I've seen. And where a customer has also started their transition to a cloud, then you've got data in a cloud platform as well. So to answer your question, I think firstly to clarify that not all clouds are made equally, right? So when I reference my answer, what I'm referring to is a single vendor cloud platform, because a multi-vendor cloud platform, a cloud platform that's made up of applications from various vendors, is likely to suffer from this data siloed piece, right? But a single vendor cloud platform has that benefit of having that integrated data set and the various applications within that cloud application utilizing that data. So it's exposed to those various applications. So that kind of deals with the underlying infra and data piece. And then the other piece, I guess, is the front end, the applications that the agents, the supervisors, the admins use to access the data and utilize reporting and analysis and all that sort of stuff. Again, if you're looking at a siloed technology piece, you might have multiple applications that you need to try to derive some value out of, whether nowadays we're moving to that single pane of glass, which is making life a lot easier. So I hope I've answered that question for you.
No, you have. And I also want to take you back to the start of the webinar where Katrina was actually giving us a really thorough grounding in the role of chatbots and AI, etc. But I wanted to get you to focus on one particular aspect, which often gets raised with me, and this is the idea of helping the agent get to the next best action. Can you explain how it is that the more contemporary solutions, the cloud-based solutions, are able to do that? And then what's the benefit to the company of doing that?
No, I think Katrina really answered it really well, but I'll try and put my spin on it. So I think in agreement that, we're not at that era now where bots can handle everything. So I'm just trying to set the scene for this answer, right? And I think that the common scenario now is that the agents can handle, the bots can handle a percentage of the interactions, a small percentage of the easy ones, and then hand off to agents. Now that can be either hand off with no assistance or hand off with assistance. So the reference that Katrina made around providing knowledge back to the agents is one aspect of it. But we're seeing cases where the bots could, for example, provide cross-sell and upsell opportunities back to the agent so they can talk to the customer intelligently and those sorts of things. I think the paradigm shift is that, in the next probably 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a big change in the workforce. My personal belief anyway, is that what we're going to see is the bots are going to start handling a majority of these conversations, and the hard ones, the more difficult ones, are going to go to the agents. And then what the flow-on effect of that will be is that the CX workforce is going to be much more skilled and probably a more expensive resource to be able to handle those interactions. And they're going to obviously need the bots to assist them. But once you've got a more skilled workforce, obviously you want to derive more value of them, out of them. So then you've got situations where you want to be able to schedule and forecast these guys properly, and you want to be able to provide them with the valuable or the rich set of data, as we call it, to be able to handle an interaction properly. So again, tying in all the concepts we've spoken about today around the chatbots, the omnichannel data, the ability to be able to personalize their journeys and show the journey to the agent when they arrive, to understand, so that the agent can understand the context, to use analytics, for example, to derive the sentiment of the conversation. I spoke about AI and cross-sell and upsell, and the other dynamic that's starting to emerge, and it's been in practice probably for a couple of years in the States, but it's only sort of a new concept here, is personality-based routing. So, excuse me, using AI and the tools around that to be able to identify a customer and identify their personality, match the intent of the call with the sentiment of the call, and find the best agent based on their personality to be able to handle the call. That's where the next, I guess, transition of AI is going to play a part.
the final question I wanted to ask you is really around analytics. And one of the things I wanted to see is if you've got a practical example of how a better understanding of the customer through the use of analytics can be used to benefit the business.
There's probably 3 parts to this answer. I'll start off with the easiest, and then I'll close off with the customer story. But you know, the research and what we've seen in the market and what we've deployed is that, you know, there's 3 ways you can use the analytics. Obviously, compliance is one. Okay, so in the traditional or the old world, it was difficult for a quality management assessor to assess 100% of the recordings to understand, you know, how the recordings are tracking. These days, through analytics, you can crunch 100% of the recordings through it, and from that you can derive whether you're in compliance or out of compliance for a particular recording. So if an agent, for example, didn't play the privacy message or didn't speak the privacy message to the caller, that can be flagged and addressed. If the agent didn't pause the recording during taking down a credit card for a payment, that can be addressed. So compliance is a big one. That's probably an easier one, to be honest with you, that can be addressed through analytics. The second one is quality management. So same concept, but now we're looking at the quality of the score. So again, of the call, 100% of calls can be scrutinized, and then we can take that information and we can use that to identify our trends and boost our customer satisfaction by improving processes, and we can evaluate the agent performance, and we can identify opportunities for training and improvement and those sorts of things, right? So that's the second piece. But the third piece, and this is something that we're working with particular customers at the moment, is efficiency, right? So we've got a situation at the moment where we've got a customer who's got their budgets set, but what they're seeing is their interaction volumes are increasing by double digits. And of course, they need to find ways to handle that. Now, analytics is the difference between, I guess, reporting and more a rich set of data. So the reporting says, oh, my queues are getting smashed, but it doesn't tell you why. And that's where the analytics comes in, to identify where we can find the efficiencies, to make the improvements, to be able to handle some of these interactions without necessarily throwing a human element out of it. And, you know, things like decreasing customer standby time, decreasing handling time, all these initiatives can be taken by analytics and increase the quality and the service of the customer. So I think that's where the opportunity is for analytics at the moment. But the thing that to call out is that you can't just deploy analytics in isolation and hope for the best, because it really does rely on an experienced person, a data analyst or a data scientist, to be able to interpret these analytics report and derive the value out of it, to be able to talk to the business, to give the insight as to why the situation or why the efficiency or inefficiency is occurring.
Jim, that's excellent. That comes to the end of the formal part of the webinar today, and we're going to take some audience questions. The first one relates to a point that Jim made in his presentation, the idea that as some of these new technologies, such as the chatbots and machine learning, are applied, the kinds of queries that get through to the agents are likely to be more difficult because the technology will take care and the automation will take care of the easy ones. So I'm going to ask this question of both Tracy and Katrina. Tracy, I'll start with you first, so you might just want to come off mute. In terms of your planning, when you think of the kinds of work that your agents will need to do in future, do you anticipate that work will change and that their capabilities will change and need to be enhanced, basically?
Definitely. I guess that's the key, isn't it? We're trying to get rid of those mundane tasks so that they've got a more exciting and fulfilling role to be doing. And that mundane stuff can happen by our chatbots and our voice bots, or that level of IA that we can do. That's entirely the place that we want to go.
I was also impressed with in the presentation you gave in Sydney, when you talked a little bit about the experience of the folk in the contact centre. Could you elaborate a little bit on that as well? Because I think that's actually a really interesting point, that in fact the nature of the job that they do starts to change a bit.
So in terms of the fact that at the moment they are, their concentration is not about the work that they're doing, it's about how long it takes for them to do it. So they'll often take the quickest way that they can do it. So what we want to do is change this, take away the KPIs around average handling time and make the focus on first call resolution instead. So therefore, those short time frame calls, those ones with a limited AHT, can be completed by robotics or chatbots or a simple task that they won't need to do, and we can change the people who are coming in to work for us.
Fantastic. And Katrina, from your perspective, in terms of the finance clients that you've worked with and the use of the virtual assistant, have you seen, or is your expectation, or is the reality that the nature of the work that they do changes and the nature of the capabilities that they require is changing and will likely change in future?
Yeah, look, I've really loved listening to Jim and Tracy. I think we're all three of us are consistent in our response on this, that the nature of work that the humans do will change in the future. We expect the bots to be able to do the more routine tasks and functions, so whether that's a workflow internally or interacting with customers, and that does lift the humans up to be doing what we call more human aspects, so better relationship management, more complex problem solving, potentially complaints handling, better upsell and cross-sell, but augmented by the machine. So I think that's really is going to be the case and will come within the next 2 years. My concern is I don't know that organisations are thinking about this from an organisational design and behavioural point of view. They're treating it more as a technology project, just putting this technology in and then hoping that the org side of it will take care of itself, and I'm not sure that it is. The other thing that I'm doing a lot of work on now is ethics in artificial intelligence and emerging technology. And in fact, Minister Andrews just 1 week ago released Australia's first AI ethics principles, and on Friday released a group of us went to Parliament House in Canberra, and the AI roadmap for Australia was released. So we do also in this conversation need to be thinking about how organisations are not only designing for the coming of the robots and machines, but also how we're going to do that in an ethical way.
All right, now I've got time for one more audience question, and just while we'll give you an opportunity to think what that question might be, I do have one more question for Tracy. We've talked a lot about AI and chatbots today. We didn't get a chance to have a chat to you about where you see that fitting into your roadmap, and are you using it today? Does it fit into the future?
So this year has been about putting the foundations down, updating our old systems and making everything right for the future. The exciting things start next year once we've gone completely live with this project, where we're going to be starting up a continuous improvement stream of work, which will include voice bots and voice biometrics and chatbots with machine learning. All of that exciting stuff starts next year.
Fantastic. That brings us to the end of the webinar today. The recording will be available online if you wish to listen to it again. We will have that up probably in the next 24 to 48 hours. I'd like to thank Katrina Wallace, Tracy Duffy and Jim Chrysakos today for their time. And thank you all for coming in and listening today. We really appreciate the time that you've given us. And this is a fascinating topic that we will be spending more time investigating in the future. Thank you all very much.